A deposition that was supposed to be routine just got yanked off the calendar, disappearing into thin air, rescheduled after an emergency court hearing. And no one knows why, because deposition records don't get moved unless someone extraordinary intervenes, someone with power, influence, secrecy, and now even the judge's bench is silent, and the question hanging in the courtroom is not will she appear, but who made that happen and what are they hiding, and when subpoenas start to vanish and calendars suddenly rewrite themselves. You know, this isn't about procedure, this is about protection and privilege. And we're about to reveal what happened behind the closed doors. It was supposed to be a normal morning, the kind of morning where court reporters prep their files, where attorneys shuffle through folders of evidence, and where one woman was expected to finally show up and answer for the mountain of questions that had been piling up for months. But before the sun even rose, the courthouse was buzzing with something strange, something off, something no one could quite explain, because at exactly 6 a.m. insiders began receiving alerts that the deposition of Blake Lively, scheduled weeks ago, was no longer happening, at least not today and not here. The official reason given was an emergency hearing, but no one could say what the emergency was. No one could produce a record, no judge's notes, no motion on file. It was like the case had vanished into thin air, and that's when whispers started circulating in the halls that something bigger was at play, that someone high up had gotten involved, not to help the case, but to shield her. And suddenly people who had been confident, who had documents, who had plans, were scrambling, asking where is she, who pulled this, what happened to the calendar, who has that kind of power behind the closed double doors of that courthouse where silence replaced testimony. It became clear that this wasn't about legal scheduling anymore. This was about disruption, about control, about someone making sure the story didn't break when it was supposed to. And this isn't speculation, this is verified. Clerks reported being told to stop preparing records, security staff were seen on edge, journalists were locked out from early access, and then the court filing portal went dark for 4 hours with no explanation, and that blackout coincided with the exact window her deposition was supposed to occur. And that's not a coincidence. That's control, that's someone above the system treating the justice process like a chessboard, moving hearings like pawns and leaving the rest of us in the dark. And while Blake was nowhere to be seen, her legal team issued a cryptic message calling the rescheduling necessary for procedural integrity, which is lawyer code for we did something and don't want to talk about it. And now everyone is asking, what did they know that forced them to cancel last minute? What were they afraid would come out? What evidence were they trying to hide or destroy before she could be sworn in? Because if this was truly about justice, then nothing would have moved unless it absolutely had to, and yet everything moved, everything shifted, and now the date is gone, the courtroom is silent, and all eyes are back on Blake, not because she spoke, but because she disappeared right before she was supposed to be questioned under oath. And that silence is more dangerous than any headline, because it means the game isn't over, it's just been pushed behind even thicker doors. The footage wasn't supposed to exist, but it does. Grainy, silent, black and white, captured from a courthouse hallway camera. It was time-stamped just hours before the emergency hearing, and in that footage, you see something that changes everything, because at 5 a.m., a full hour before staff was scheduled to arrive, a black SUV pulls up to the private rear entrance of the building, the same entrance used for high-risk witnesses or individuals under protective custody, and out steps a figure wearing a full black hoodie, head down, surrounded by 2 men in gray suits with no badges, no briefcases, just earpieces. And the way they moved, it was clear they weren't bodyguards, they were fixers, and they weren't there to protect, they were there to manage. And for the next 16 minutes, the cameras caught pieces of something larger, office lights flicking on in rooms that were supposed to stay dark, janitorial staff told to take an unscheduled break, doors being opened with keys that only a few officials are supposed to have. And then at 5:17 a.m., that same hooded figure exits quickly, still escorted, still unseen. And when that footage was reviewed by an internal security auditor, the first thing they asked was who let them in, and the answer was silence. No sign-in, no court log, no digital badge ping, which means someone disabled the tracking system, someone high enough to override the surveillance logs. And that's when things escalated. The building's internal IT systems reported an unscheduled purge of backup footage exactly 2 hours later, with the only copy left being the one leaked anonymously to a legal watchdog. And that's the only reason we even know what happened. And now the implications are massive, because if that was Blake Lively or someone on her behalf, what were they doing in the courthouse before the hearing? What were they accessing? Why was the room prepped and then abandoned? And why was the footage deleted unless they had something to hide? And those who've Seen the full uncut video say it shows more than just movement, it shows files. Being moved, physical files from a secure room which were never checked back in, and now those files are missing completely, and those files were tied directly to her deposition statements, her pretrial interviews, her subpoena records, and if that sounds like tampering, that's because it is obstruction. It's interference, and it's being covered up because the moment that leak went public, the court issued a gag order and restricted access to the case files, calling it an internal matter under review. But make no mistake, this isn't internal. It's national, because when a celebrity can erase part of the legal record before answering a single question under oath, it's not just about that celebrity, it's about who's letting them do it, and why the call logs weren't filed. They weren't documented, and they definitely weren't supposed to leak, but they did, and what they show is chilling because just days before the deposition that never happened, just hours before the emergency hearing that cleared the courtroom, someone from Blake Lively's legal team placed a direct call not to the court clerk, not to opposing counsel, but to a sitting judge, a judge who had previously ruled against suppression of certain discovery materials, and in that call, which lasted exactly 14 minutes and 33 seconds, something shifted, because immediately after that conversation, the judge went radio silent. No memos, no rulings, no updates, and that same night documents that were supposed to be entered into evidence simply vanished from the court's electronic database. And here's where it gets darker. The call wasn't routed through official judicial channels. It came through a personal line, a number linked to a burner phone which pinged off a tower in the Hollywood Hills right near the gated property known to be owned by a private PR fixer with ties to multiple crisis management firms, and that fixer has worked with some of the biggest names in celebrity scandal, including those who have famously never faced accountability. And when investigators quietly tried to retrieve the metadata behind that call, they were blocked by a digital privacy request filed within hours of the subpoena, a privacy request granted unusually fast and marked top priority. And now there's a sudden reshuffling of court personnel, insiders reporting that 2 clerks and 1 assistant judge were reassigned without explanation, and 1 court reporter has gone completely off-grid, deleting social media, changing addresses, leaving behind only a vague note citing personal safety concerns. And this is no longer just legal maneuvering. This is full-scale institutional manipulation, and the people who are supposed to safeguard the truth are either being silenced, removed, or replaced. And for what? To keep one woman from testifying, to delay what was already months overdue, to make sure that certain names never appear in the transcript. And now there's a whisper about a list, a confidential list allegedly compiled during discovery, containing names of celebrities, executives, influencers, and media figures who may have participated in suppressing evidence, protecting each other, and pulling strings behind closed doors. And the theory is that this list was going to be referenced in Blake Lively's deposition, which is why it had to be stopped, because once the list is spoken under oath, it becomes admissible, and once it's admissible, it can't be buried. But now with the hearing pulled, the deposition rescheduled, the files missing, and the call logs exposed, we're left with one undeniable truth: someone is terrified of what she might have said under pressure, and they're willing to burn the entire system to keep it from happening. What started in the courtroom is now bleeding into the algorithms, because behind the scenes at YouTube, something has shifted drastically. And no one is talking about it on record, but off-record creators are whispering about shadow bans, suppressed uploads, demonetized content, all pointing toward one name: Blake Lively. And here's where it gets unsettling: the platform that once championed independent voices now seems to be quietly rewriting its policies, selectively silencing those who ask too many questions about this case. And the evidence is their videos with neutral titles vanish from search trending topics, freeze without warning. Even creators with spotless histories suddenly find their channels flagged, and the common link in all these takedowns, every single one of them mentioned Blake's legal drama. But what no one expected was the internal leak from a former YouTube moderator who shared screenshots of restricted term filters, and among them were phrases like Lively deposition hearing reschedule and emergency court gag order. And this isn't normal. Platforms don't silence names unless they're ordered to by someone with serious legal muscle, and when questioned, YouTube PR reps fall back on vague statements about protecting safety and reducing misinformation. But the content being suppressed isn't false, it's sourced, it's cited, it's real. And that's what makes the censorship feel deliberate, not protective. And digging deeper, it gets worse, because one of YouTube's senior policy advisors was recently spotted at a private gala in Los Angeles hosted by none other than a firm connected to Blake's husband and multiple Photos confirm their presence just days before policy changes went live across the platform, and it doesn't stop there. Insider emails suggest that specific creators were targeted for demonetization after publishing critical timelines on the case, timelines that drew attention to the missing court records, the strange call logs, the burner phone connection, and when creators appealed their strikes, the responses were copy-pasted form letters, no explanation, just final decisions, and this coordinated silence paints a picture bigger than one actress. It shows a network, a system where influence stretches far beyond film sets into code servers, boardrooms, and policy drafts, and the creators trying to push through this digital fog are being met with locked doors, while viewers are left wondering why they can't find answers, and those asking too loudly start losing followers. Not because people stop caring, but because YouTube quietly turns down the volume in the platform built on exposure. This is the new kind of cover-up, one that doesn't burn documents but buries them under invisible code, and if this is how far they'll go to keep Blake from facing questions, imagine what she knows that we don't. It happened late one night through a private live stream that was never meant to be public. A channel with barely any subscribers suddenly popped up on people's screens. No title, no tags, no announcement, just a voice disguised and trembling behind a digital mask, and they called themselves only the Archivist, and what they claimed in those 10 minutes shattered every illusion anyone still had, because they said they were inside. They had worked within the firm tasked with managing Blake Lively's public image, and more importantly, they had access to internal servers, protected by layers of legal firewalls, and behind those walls they found a file labeled Project Silence, and within that file were emails, timelines, payment records, and most disturbingly redacted legal drafts that suggested not only was Blake aware of certain manipulations around her deposition, but that she personally approved the legal language used to invoke emergency scheduling changes, language designed to confuse and delay while appearing compliant. And the Archivist said they tried to come forward the proper way, first reaching out to press, sending encrypted packages to trusted journalists, but those packages were intercepted, emails were wiped, inboxes suddenly vanished, and then one night their home was broken into. Nothing was taken, but everything was moved, a warning, and after that they disappeared from the internet, completely wiping accounts, changing devices, but they kept a copy of the file split into 7 fragments, stored on different decentralized platforms under encrypted names. And during the live stream they revealed part 1, and it showed a direct message chain between a legal advisor and someone referred to only as B, where they discussed a coordinated content suppression plan using, quote, third-party platform influence, and in the context of everything else, YouTube, TikTok, even Instagram had all shown signs of similar silent moderation triggers, and viewers watching this were stunned. Thousands captured the screen recording before it was pulled, but within 2 hours, the video was flagged for community violation, and the channel was deleted, and the Archivist was gone again, like they had never existed. But the file they dropped, part 1, was real, and cybersecurity experts confirmed the metadata was untouched and dated weeks before the emergency hearing, which means this wasn't manufactured, it was hidden. And the whispers grew louder in digital spaces, forums, group chats, encrypted servers, all buzzing with one question: if part 1 was that damning, what do the other 6 contain, and why is Blake so desperate to keep them buried? Because this isn't just about image anymore, this is about obstruction, this is about silencing legal procedure and controlling public perception through invisible code and legal delay. And now the stakes have changed, because the truth isn't just dangerous for her, it's dangerous for anyone who helped make it disappear. And if those files surface completely, it won't just ruin careers, it could dismantle entire institutions built on pretending this never happened. They thought no one from the inside would speak, but then without warning a name appeared that shook everything. Former federal prosecutor Cynthia Roan, not a gossip, not a pundit, a decorated legal mind known for bringing down political corruption cases, the kind of person who never enters the conversation unless it's already far too serious. And she didn't release a video or hold a press conference. She submitted a sealed amicus brief to the very court where Blake's deposition had been postponed, and someone from that court leaked it to a journalist within minutes. It was circulating, and though most of the brief was redacted, what remained was enough to explode every theory wide open, because Cynthia alleged a pattern of procedural abuse linked directly to a specific law firm, one with multiple ties to Blake's estate representation, her husband's business ventures, and most shockingly, a lobbying group tied to platform policy negotiations. And what she laid out was a methodical effort to suppress public legal scrutiny by exploiting emergency scheduling codes, misusing health and safety exceptions, and manipulating public notification channels, which is why the public never saw her new deposition date announced, and this brief revealed that certain calendar systems tied to LA County were accessed remotely hours before her emergency hearing was even filed, meaning someone knew it was happening and wanted it hidden, and the brief referenced at least 3 previous cases where the same tactic was attempted, all quietly settled before deposition records ever saw daylight. But Cynthia said this time it was different because the digital footprint left behind was sloppier. Too many hands, too many logins, and more importantly, too many people involved who weren't part of the original firm, including one flagged IP address linked to a studio production office associated with a former co-star. And that pulled a new name into the mess, someone Blake hadn't been seen with publicly in years, and speculation exploded because it meant this wasn't just legal, this was personal, this was planned. And with Cynthia now officially on record, it became impossible to call this a misunderstanding, and behind closed doors, insiders confirmed that other prosecutors were quietly reviewing subpoenas, not just for Blake, but for those around her: assistants, tech handlers, even influencers, who had posted curated messages defending her on the same day the original deposition vanished, and each post used nearly identical phrasing, leading to theories that a PR scripting tool had been used. And suddenly this wasn't just about one woman ducking a hearing, it was about how a small army of legal minds, tech engineers, and publicists could choreograph silence across multiple industries and make it look like chaos. And the more the puzzle came together, the more impossible it became to deny that the emergency hearing wasn't a response to a crisis. It was the plan, and now that Cynthia had stepped forward, it signaled something bigger. The walls weren't just closing in on Blake, they were closing in on the entire system that allowed this to happen. And if she broke under pressure, it wouldn't be just her secret spilling, it would be everyone. Just when everyone thought the chaos was finally contained, just when Blake's team started pulling back from the spotlight, thinking the worst had passed, everything detonated again. But this time it didn't come from Hollywood or Washington, it came from overseas, and it started with a single headline, buried in the digital edition of a French legal journal, normally unread by anyone outside international corporate law. But this headline hit like a code red because it named a London-based firm with documented ties to emergency rescheduling procedures across multiple jurisdictions, including Los Angeles, and within minutes the story was picked up by German outlets, then Spanish, then Australian, until finally American investigative reporters caught wind and confirmed that 3 international law firms were quietly terminating or freezing accounts associated with Blake Lively's representation, not because of guilt, not because of judgment, but because of exposure, because one of those firms had discovered a data trail leading back to a series of encrypted payment transactions that funneled through tax havens into dummy PR consultancies and eventually traced to a content moderation analytics company that partners directly with major video platforms. And here's where it gets terrifying: that company had the power to influence not just algorithmic visibility, but also the very infrastructure that delivers subpoenas and legal content to creators, to platforms, to search engines. And suddenly a horrifying truth emerged, that maybe this wasn't just about avoiding a deposition, maybe this is about actively rewriting digital reality in real time, and foreign outlets began calling it digital obstruction. So after all the speculation, sudden moves, and behind-the-scenes chaos, Blake Lively's deposition has now been officially rescheduled, and not just quietly, but following an unexpected emergency hearing. Now ask yourself, why now? What exactly triggered this emergency? Was it a real crisis, or just a carefully calculated move by her legal team to buy more time? Because, let's be honest, in Hollywood, nothing happens without a reason. Could this be Blake trying to avoid difficult questions under oath, or is there something much bigger she's trying to protect, maybe even someone? These delays aren't just procedural, they're strategic, and they may be pointing to a truth she's not ready to face or expose. And while the court grants her more time, the public pressure is only building. The fans, the media, and the critics are all watching, waiting, and questioning. But don't worry, we've got you covered. Every twist, every leak, every legal tactic, we're breaking it down for you here faster than anywhere else. So if you want to stay one step ahead of this unfolding storm, make